You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button.
One of the really interesting stories, and this is a report from Football Scoop, is that even with LSU hiring Bo Davis, they're still pursuing Kevin Peoples. Now, Kevin Peoples is the Missouri defensive line coach. Is there under Blake Baker. And he's been there for the past 2 seasons. And late last week, on Friday, when Football Scoop and I think it was On Texas and others reported that it looked like Bo Davis was going to stay in Austin, a lot of the attention here shifted after Blake Baker was hired to Kevin Peoples. So Kevin Peoples is he's got 30 years experience in coaching, and he's been at, the early 90s was at Northwestern State in Natchitoches. He's bounced around a bunch. He actually had 2 stints at Northwestern State. I spent a long time at Arkansas State in Jonesboro. Was at the University of Arkansas with Bobby Petrino in the early 2010s as defensive line coach. Went to UAB in 2013. As a matter of fact, do you remember the game in Baton Rouge in 2013 when LSU played UAB and Odell had the kick six? Famously, Alabama's kick six in 2013 Auburn's kick six against Alabama happened because Auburn's coaches were watching game film of LSU and saw Odell do that against UAB, and that's why they put it in. Anyway, Kevin Peoples was on that UAB staff that lost in Baton Rouge that day. He went to Georgia Southern, spent 4 years at Tulane, so in Louisiana, and then went to Indiana for 2 years, and now the last 2 years at Missouri. And he has coached defensive ends, defensive line, special teams, and he's done that for 30 years as an assistant. He's never been a coordinator. He's been basically a defensive end, defensive line, special teams coach. And his expertise really is edge rushers. So apparently, even with the news that they're hiring Bo Davis, LSU is still pursuing Kevin Peoples. And I think that's fine, by the way. How you want to structure your staff, you want to let Bo Davis coach your defensive tackles, you want to bring in Kevin Peoples and let him coach defensive ends, fine. You want to let Peoples maybe coach linebackers, or Blake Baker can coach linebackers and you bring in a safeties coach. There's a lot of different ways that you could do this. But the biggest question is how Brian Kelly wants to structure his staff. Here's what I mean. You've got your head coach and you've got 10 full-time assistants. So follow me here. I wish I could diagram this for you, but I know you're listening. You got 10 full-time assistants. Right now on offense, you've got Joe Sloan, Cortez Hankton, Frank Wilson, and Brad Davis, right? So you got 4. Mike Denbrock's gone, so you got to replace Denbrock. If you promote Sloan to OC, you still have to hire a tight ends coach. As I understand it, that would be most likely be Slade Nagel from Tulane, who would be high. If you promote Sloan to OC, keep him as quarterbacks coach, you need someone to coach tight ends, Slade Nagel would be the guy, most likely. Excuse me. Defensively, you got Blake Baker, Bo Davis, John Jancic and Bob Diaco are still on staff. That's something a lot of people don't mention. Everyone says the whole defensive staff was fired. No, they weren't. You've still got Bob Diaco and John Jancic on staff. Are you retaining Diaco and Jancic? If so, then you've got 2 spots available. Would it be Nagel and Peoples, and that's it? Well, now you get into some real odd questions. If that's what you do, well, then who coaches your defensive backs? Do you hire a cornerbacks coach or a quarterbacks and safeties coach? There has been a lot of talk around the program of bringing in the desire to bring in a full-time special teams coordinator. Well, if you bring in a full-time special teams coordinator where that's their only role, well, then you're taking one assistant away from the defensive side of the ball. Maybe instead of a defensive line and edge coach. You only have a defensive line coach. Well, if that's the case, and you're still pursuing Kevin Peoples, and where does he go? Blake Baker can coach linebackers or safeties. So does John Jancic go coach linebackers like he was supposed to, and Baker coach your safeties, and you bring in a cornerbacks coach. Corey Raymond is the name we've all heard, but still waiting to see if they get that across the finish line. This is why I think a lot of the why there's been a holdup. People are wondering, why haven't these things been announced? I think you have to decide who you can get and then what roles they're going to fill, and it's a chicken or the egg question. Do you decide first what roles you want to fill, or is it more important to get the guys you want on staff and then determine how you're going to delegate their roles and responsibilities? So that's something Brian Kelly and his staff are going to have to piece together. You know, if you're able to add Kevin Peoples, you get a guy that has been a great defensive line coach to complement Bo Davis, a guy that's also got a great reputation as a recruiter and has experience in Louisiana at Tulane and Northwestern State and experience in the SEC. So there's a lot to like about that if they're able to get that done. You know, Football Scoop is reporting that LSU is still pursuing Kevin Peoples. So we'll see if they're able to get that done. You know, the interesting thing, though, about Peoples and Bo Davis and a lot of the assistants we're talking about here, y'all, they have no ties to Brian Kelly. Kevin Peoples has no ties to Brian Kelly. Bo Davis has no ties to Brian Kelly. And that's, by the way, it's a good thing. Not in and of itself that you're hiring people that don't have ties to Brian Kelly, because that would be a negative. That's not what I mean. What I'm saying is, very clearly, Brian Kelly is trusting his people to help, who have been on championship staffs here, to help him assemble a championship staff that can build a championship roster here. I mean, the Bo Davis hiring has Verge Osbury, Frank Wilson, Scott Woodward, Pete Jenkins. It's got their fingerprints all over it. But Brian Kelly has to say, go get me my defensive line coach. And they delivered. If Kevin Peoples is hired, that's your head coach delegating to his defensive coordinator saying, you want this guy? Go make it happen. And that's a level of trust as a leader that you need from your head coach. And clearly, Brian Kelly trusts the people around him to delegate those very important responsibilities to make this happen. So Football Scoops reporting LSU is still pursuing Kevin Peoples. Missouri is still trying to keep Kevin Peoples. So as that develops, we'll certainly talk more about it.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.